All right, let's get right into it. Today we're taking a deep dive into a world that's well, it's usually the stuff of headlines, ripped straight from the news.
Exactly. We're going deep, really deep into the world of the Rollin' 60s neighborhood Crips.
Whoa.
And we're doing it through it's called a superseding indictment. It's basically a very, very detailed legal document.
Oh.
Straight from the United States District Court in New Jersey.
So this indictment, it's like it lays out a bunch of charges against them, right?
It does, yeah. Think of it as like a very formal and very serious accusation of criminal activity.
Okay, so not exactly light reading then, huh?
No, not exactly. But what makes it so fascinating is, well, it pulls back the curtain on how the Rollin' 60s allegedly operated here in New Jersey.
I see. And how is that? What makes this case so different or fascinating?
It goes way beyond just your typical street crime.
Hmm.
We're talking about an organization that's accused of drug trafficking, violence, even financial fraud.
So like a full-on criminal enterprise, not just a small-time operation.
That's exactly what it looks like, yeah.
So, okay, for those of us who don't know a whole lot about the Rollin' 60s, can you give us a little bit of background?
Sure. So they actually, they didn't start in New Jersey. They originated in Los Angeles.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But over time, their influence, it kind of spread across state lines, reaching multiple states, including New Jersey.
Wow. So how far back are we talking here?
Their roots go back decades.
Decades. Wow.
And to make things even more complicated, they've actually established a presence within the New Jersey prison system.
Oh, wow. So they're operating both inside and outside of prison.
That's what it seems like.
That's chilling to think about their reach extending behind bars.
It is.
But how did they manage such a complex operation? Like, was there a clear structure to their organization?
Absolutely. And the indictment goes into great detail about this. They had a hierarchy with ranks and rules, very much like a traditional organization.
Like a business, almost.
Yeah, except their business was anything but legal, right? They operated under this umbrella group called the Silverback Guerrillas.
Silverback Guerrillas.
Or SBG for short. And then they divided themselves into districts and units to control different territories.
So like a chain of command.
Exactly. A very well-defined chain of command.
Okay, so the indictment, it focuses on their alleged activities in Essex, Middlesex, and Mercer counties. Is that right?
That's right, with a lot of activity concentrated in specific neighborhoods, places like Newark, Irvington, Elizabeth, East Orange.
Got it.
It's like they strategically chose these locations as hubs for their operations.
Okay, so let's talk about the crimes themselves. Like, the indictment mentions drug trafficking as a core activity. Was that all they were focused on?
Well, drug trafficking definitely seems to have been central to their operation.
Right.
But the indictment actually accuses them of a whole range of criminal activities, like we're talking murder, robbery, auto theft, witness tampering, even financial fraud.
Whoa, that's a long list. So they weren't afraid to get their hands dirty, so to speak.
No, not at all. And it's clear from the indictment that they used violence strategically.
Strategically? How so?
Well, both to maintain control within their own ranks and to intimidate anyone who might pose a threat.
Like rivals, witnesses?
Exactly. They wanted to send a clear message. Don't mess with us.
Okay, but behind every organization, there are individuals, right? Like, who are the key players named in this indictment?
11 individuals were indicted in this case. And the document, it lists both their real names and their street names.
Oh, wow. Like aliases?
Yeah, aliases like, Freak, Lil Smith, Try Me, Tsu Surf, G-Baby, and G-To.
It's almost surreal to hear those names, like something out of a movie.
It is. It gives you a real glimpse into that gang culture.
Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the more prominent figures and their roles?
Sure. So one of the key figures is Jason Franklin, also known as Freak. The indictment describes him as a senior member who allegedly communicated with Rollin' 60s leadership in other states. He was issuing orders to lower-ranking members in New Jersey, kind of like a high-ranking executive in their criminal enterprise.
So he was calling the shots, essentially.
You could say that, yeah.
Who else is there?
Another important figure is Amir Warden, also known as Stamps or Killa. He's described as another senior member, and he was allegedly responsible for organizing the transportation of marijuana from California to New Jersey.
Wow, so he was handling the logistics?
Exactly, coordinating drug distribution in and around Irvington and Elizabeth.
Like the COO almost?
Yes, something like that.
And what about these other individuals? What were their roles?
So you've got Elijah Williams, or Lil Smith, Trey Bird, known as Bands, or G-Bands, Tyheim Terry, or Ty, or Rollin' Ty.
Okay.
Then there's Rahjon Cox, known as Tsu Surf, Amir Edmonds, or G. Beatty, Abdul Ural, who went by Rune It Up, or BB,
Got it.
and then Nike Johnson, or Jito. They're all accused of playing various roles in the organization, from drug dealing to more violent acts.
It sounds like a very tight-knit group, each with a specific function within their criminal enterprise.
That's the impression you get from the indictment.
Okay, and now this is where things get really interesting to me, at least. The indictment, it puts a lot of emphasis on their use of social media, which seems kind of counterintuitive, for a criminal organization.
Oh, you'd think they'd want us to be under the radar, right?
Exactly.
But the indictment really paints a vivid picture of how they used platforms like Instagram and Facebook, not just to communicate,
Right.
but to boast about their activities, threaten witnesses, coordinate drug sales, even plan violent acts.
They were practically advertising their criminal activities, weren't they?
It's like they wanted people to know who they were and what they were capable of.
So social media, it was more than just a communication tool for them. It was like a weapon, a way to project their power.
Exactly. It was all about image,
Hmm.
about building a reputation and instilling fear.
It's a really disturbing example of how technology can be exploited for criminal purposes.
It is, and what's striking is just how much detail the indictment provides.
Really?
Yeah, there are screenshots of messages, posts, videos, all allegedly created by the defendants.
Like they documented their own crimes.
It's almost like they left a digital trail, a breadcrumb trail of their alleged criminal activities.
So it sounds like their online presence actually became a key piece of evidence for the prosecution.
It definitely seems that way, yeah. They might have thought they were being clever, but they were actually helping to build the case against them.
And we'll dig into some of those specific examples in the next part of our deep dive.
We will. We've got some really interesting stuff to unpack there.
Can't wait.
It's going to be good.
So we were talking about social media and how the Roland 60s were allegedly using it not just to chat, but to threaten and intimidate. It's almost like a whole new level of criminal strategy.
It really is. It's fascinating, but also a bit unsettling to see how they incorporated social media into their operations.
So were there any instances of social media use that really stood out to you from the indictment?
Yeah, definitely. There's one involving Nike Johnson, a.k.a. Jito,
Yeah.
where the indictment includes this message, and he's allegedly negotiating a drug deal, just casually laying out prices like it's, a legitimate business transaction.
No way, really?
Yeah, he writes slice 50, quarter 90, half 150, zip 250.
Wow, it's like a price list for illegal narcotics delivered straight to your inbox.
Exactly. It's a really disturbing example of how they use social media to conduct business right out in the open.
It's almost like they were blending into the digital landscape.
Yeah, they were. They were using it to their advantage.
Did they ever use these platforms to threaten witnesses or intimidate rivals?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the indictment details how they use social media to taunt their rivals and discourage cooperation with law enforcement.
Like what kind of things would they say?
Well, there's this one chilling example where Williams allegedly sent a video depicting the shooting death of victim Nate to a member of a rival gang called the Jungle Boys, and he even added the message, "Now watch ya mans die again."
That's just cold-blooded.
It is. It shows a complete disregard for human life.
They were intentionally using social media to instill fear and maintain control.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Their online presence was clearly an extension of their real-world intimidation tactics.
Speaking of real-world intimidation, the indictment outlines a number of specific criminal incidents, and these really highlight the dangerous nature of their alleged activities.
Right, and one incident that I think really illustrates how they operated within the community involves Kareem Green, a.k.a. Trimey. The indictment accuses him of using Instagram to set up a drug deal, and he even provided the buyer with the address of a building in the Crescent Lane public housing complex.
So they weren't just lurking in the shadows, they were embedded in the community.
Exactly. They were using familiar locations to conduct their business.
Which makes it even harder to combat, right?
It does. It blurs the lines between their criminal enterprise and the everyday lives of residents.
Let's talk about some of those other incidents outlined in the indictment. You mentioned earlier this string of carjackings and thefts allegedly committed by Tyheim Terry and other members in February 2021.
Yeah, those incidents are really striking. They show a blatant disregard for the law and the safety of others. The indictment alleges that Terry, along with other members, carjacked a Kia Sorento and then, at gunpoint, stole a Volvo.
At gunpoint, wow.
Yeah, and it didn't end there. They allegedly used those stolen vehicles to go on this crime spree in West Orange and Orange, breaking into approximately 12 cars, and they even attempted another carjacking.
It sounds terrifying. So it wasn't just about stealing cars, right? It was about the thrill, the power they felt in intimidating their victims.
Yeah, and the use of firearms in those incidents, it just adds another layer of danger, a willingness to escalate the violence.
Yeah, the potential consequences are they're huge.
They are, and their alleged disregard for human life it's chilling.
Were there any other incidents that really stood out to you in terms of their brutality?
The indictment describes a series of shootings that really highlight the escalating violence associated with their alleged activities. For example, there's the shooting of victim 13, victim 14, and victim 15. The indictment alleges that Terry, Green, and another individual were driving around Newark in a stolen Honda, randomly firing shots at people on 3 separate occasions.
It's like they were treating human life as a game, just firing their weapons without any regard for the consequences.
It's a tragic illustration of the mindset often associated with gang violence. And the indictment goes on to describe an incident where shots were fired at a vigil for victim 8, the individual who was allegedly murdered in 2019.
That's awful. Even a moment of mourning is disrupted by violence.
It's this cycle of retaliation that seems to have no end.
And social media played a role in that cycle too, right?
It did, yeah. The indictment reveals that Williams allegedly used Instagram to mock one of the shooters involved in the visual shooting for only wounding someone in the leg. It's like they were glorifying the violence, encouraging more retaliation.
It's just disturbing how social media becomes both a tool for inciting violence and a platform for boasting about their involvement.
It's like this dangerous feedback loop where their online activity reinforces their offline behavior.
So the indictment does an incredible job of revealing the dark side of this criminal organization. But what about the other side of the story? Like, how did law enforcement manage to build such a comprehensive case against the Roland 60s?
That's where things get really interesting. The indictment, it actually highlights the investigative techniques used by law enforcement, and it showcases the effort and resources involved in dismantling a criminal organization like this.
So what strategies did they use? Was it just good old-fashioned detective work, or did they have to employ some more modern techniques?
It was a combination of both. The indictment mentions surveillance, wiretaps, social media monitoring, all working together to build this case.
So a multi-pronged approach, leveraging both traditional and modern investigative techniques.
Exactly. They had to be adaptable, resourceful, to keep up with the Roland 60s, especially with their use of social media.
It sounds like a massive undertaking.
It was, and the indictment provides this fascinating glimpse into the complexity of modern law enforcement. But we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. Why don't we take a break, and when we come back, we'll explore the investigative side of this case in more detail.
Sounds good to me. So we've really gotten a good look at, the criminal activities of the Roland 60s, but now I want to know more about, how the police were able to build this case against them.
It was definitely a complex operation, and just the amount of evidence they have is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It seems like investigators really took their time to document everything.
So what were some of their key strategies? What did they do to crack this case?
Well, like we talked about before, they used a bunch of different techniques.
Right.
Traditional methods like surveillance,
Mm-hmm.
but also newer technology like wiretaps and social media monitoring.
It's like they had to be, adaptable to keep up with the Roland 60s, especially since they were so good at using social media themselves.
Exactly. And it seems like all that social media use really backfired on them.
Yeah.
Because the indictment has tons of screenshots of messages, posts, videos, all created by the defendants.
Wow.
It's almost like they handed the prosecution all this evidence on a silver platter.
So their confidence in using social media really blew up in their faces, huh?
It seems that way. Yeah, they might have thought they could operate freely online, but they forgot that anything you post can and will be used against you, right?
Right. So it wasn't just social media, though, right? What other techniques did law enforcement use?
Well, they use wiretaps too, which means they were listening in on their phone calls,
Oh, wow.
gathering evidence of their conversations and their plans.
So they were, right there in their inner circle.
Pretty much. And they also used physical surveillance too, like
Mhm.
actually following them around
Mm-hmm.
to track their movements and see who they were meeting with.
It sounds like they really threw everything they had at this case.
They did. It was a major undertaking involving a lot of different law enforcement agencies working together.
This case is really a good example of just how complex modern law enforcement is.
Yeah, they had to be tech savvy, adaptable, and good at working with other agencies to take down groups like the Roland 60s.
So we've seen the crimes, the people involved, the investigation, but what does it all mean for us listening? What can we take away from all of this?
Well, I think it raises some big questions about how organized crime is changing with technology
Right.
and what law enforcement needs to do to keep up. They have
Mhm.
to be proactive, innovative, work together.
It's like crime's evolving, so law enforcement has to evolve too.
Exactly. And I think it also shows how important it is for communities to be aware and get involved
Like, how can we do that?
by reporting any suspicious activity and supporting programs that give young people other options besides joining a gang.
So it's not just about the police, it's about everyone working together to, like, prevent this kind of stuff from happening in the first place.
That's right. We need to invest in programs that give kids opportunities, a sense of belonging, hope for the future.
This whole deep dive has been really eye-opening, seeing a world that we usually just hear about on the news.
It's easy to forget that there are real people behind these headlines.
Yeah.
Victims, families, communities who've been hurt by all this violence and crime.
It's a good reminder that this isn't just some abstract thing. It has real consequences.
Absolutely. So as you go about your day, think about all the things that contribute to gang activity and the challenges we face in stopping organized crime. It's a conversation we need to keep having, and it's something we all have a role in addressing.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of the Rollin' 60s. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the world around you.